Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome to the World Over Live. We've got an important show for you tonight. The U.S. bishops issued a bold cry for religious liberty today and a plan of action. What are they urging the laity to do, and what could be the effects of this campaign, particularly on the elections? In an exclusive interview, the chairman of the Catholic Bishops' Ad Hoc Committee for Religious Liberty and soon-to-be Archbishop of Baltimore, William Lori, is here. And later, Congressman Chris Smith of New Jersey and member of the Tom Lantos Commission on Human Rights is here to update us on the grave situation in Sudan, Syria, and the week in politics. And finally, court watcher and general counsel for the Judicial Crisis Network, Carrie Severino, will discuss the war on women charges being hurled all over D.C. Is there really a war on women? We'll get into it. And of course, if you have a point of view or a question, give us a call, send us an email. The number, 1-800-221-9460 in the U.S., internationally 205-271-2980, or drop us an email, worldover@ewtn.com. Let's get things started. Here's the brief. News from the world over this week. Christians were targeted in Nigeria this week. On Easter Sunday, 38 were killed and another 40 people seriously injured when a car bomb was detonated in the city of Kudunu. According to reports, the terrorists attempted to drive into the compound of an Assembly of God church, but were turned away by security. Shortly thereafter, the car bomb detonated in a busy street nearby. As with previous attacks in Nigeria, the jihadist group Boko Haram is suspected in the bombing. The group has claimed responsibility for other attacks on Christians and government entities, including the bombing that killed 43 faithful during Christmas Mass. The Easter attack was the group's deadliest since January, when coordinated attacks killed 256 people in the city of Kano. And for the first time, a top Vatican official has directly criticized the federal contraception mandate set to go into effect here in the United States. In a recent interview, Cardinal Raymond, head of the Apostolic Signatura, the Vatican Supreme Court, said he was grateful that his fellow American bishops have asked their flock to speak out and oppose what he called an unprecedented attack on the freedom of conscience and religion.
Our government needs to understand that what is being done with this mandate is contrary, first of all, to a fundamental human right, the right to the free exercise of one's conscience, and at the same time, contrary to the very foundations of our own nation.
Cardinal Burke also told Catholic Action for Faith and Family that Catholic employers can in no way justify providing birth control coverage as part of their health care plans. He reminded the faithful that it would constitute both material and formal cooperation in contraception. And there was a victory for conscience this week in the United Kingdom. The Catholic Herald is reporting that a contractor with England's government-run healthcare system has dropped its threat to fire a pro-life nurse. The Midlands nurse, who is Catholic, objected to being assigned to the hospital's abortion ward. After seeking legal counsel, the nurse, who asked not to be named, argued that her right of conscientious objection was protected by both British law and by the European Convention on Human Rights Equality Act of 2010. Before agreeing not to fire her, the hospital attempted to appease the nurse by noting that she would not be required to perform abortions, but only to prepare women for the procedure. The nurse objected, arguing that she would still be materially involved in the abortion. And the worst years of the clerical abuse crisis appear to be firmly behind the American Church. According to the latest child protection report commissioned by the U.S. bishops, there were 21 abuse allegations made by minors in 2011. Of those, only 7 were considered credible by law enforcement. 3 were determined to be false, 5 were deemed boundary violations, and 3 others are still under investigation. to offer some perspective of how small these numbers are, during the same reporting period, 683 adults came forward alleging past abuse. President of the Bishops' Conference, Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York, said that although the report indicates that the majority of allegations are way in the past, the Church must continue to be vigilant. The priestly abuse is still costing the Church dearly. U.S. dioceses in 2011 paid more than $108 million in expenses related to abuse. $51 million went to settlement costs. Another $36 million went to attorney's fees. Since 2004, the abuse scandal has cost the U.S. Church in toto $2.49 billion. And Pope Benedict XVI is not headed to Ireland this year. The Vatican made it official when it announced that Cardinal Mark Willett was chosen to attend the International Eucharistic Congress in Dublin as the Pope's personal representative. Hopes for a papal visit this June dimmed as relations between the Vatican and Dublin soured over the Irish Church's clerical abuse scandal. Last year, Ireland's Prime Minister Enda Kenny took to the floor of the Parliament to rebuke the Holy See for its alleged role. The Irish government officially denounced the Holy See. Earlier this year, Kenny made it clear that the government had no plans to invite the Roman Pontiff to Ireland. And Pope Benedict's outreach to disaffected Anglicans continues. This past week, a Church of England priest and 69 of his flock were received into full communion with the Catholic Church in Croydon, just outside of London. The UK Guardian reported that Reverend Donald Minshew resigned in February over decisions being made by the Church of England. He and his former parishioners cited disagreements over gay marriage and women clergy as some of the reasons for leaving the Anglican Communion. Reverend Minshew will be ordained a Catholic priest in June. And 2 of the 3 active Anglican bishops in Canada will soon become Catholics. Bishop Peter Wilkinson of Victoria and Bishop Carl Reid of Ottawa, along with other clergy and lay faithful, will be received into the Church this coming Divine Mercy Sunday. Pope Benedict has not yet established an ordinariate in Canada, so in the meantime, they'll join the U.S.-based personal ordinariate of the Chair of St. Peter. 5 other Anglican parishes in Canada previously received into the Church will join that U.S. ordinariate as well. And this week also saw the passing of 2 prominent cardinals. The one-time head of the Syrian Catholic Church, Cardinal Ignace Musa Daoud, died in Rome on Holy Saturday. Cardinal Daoud retired in 2007, having served as prefect for the Vatican's Congregation for the Eastern Churches. He was the first Eastern Catholic to head that congregation. And Puerto Rican Cardinal Luis Aponte Martinez, the Archbishop Emeritus of San Juan, died on Tuesday, April 10th, at the age of 89. His death fell on the same day he was ordained a priest 62 years earlier. Aponte was the first Puerto Rican native to be ordained a bishop and the first to be elevated to the College of Cardinals. Governor Luis Fortunio has declared 5 days of mourning for Cardinal Aponte and ordered flags be flown at half-mast. And finally, parents beware, baptizing your child could land you in jail, especially if your spouse disagrees with you. A Tennessee mother faces criminal contempt of court charges for baptizing her 2 children without the consent or knowledge of her ex-husband. Lauren Jarrell allegedly violated a court order requiring that decisions in the religious upbringing of the 2 children be made jointly with the children's father. She's a Presbyterian, he's a United Methodist. Throughout their marriage, the 2 could never agree on what age to baptize the children. An attorney for the mother is arguing the court has no say in the matter. If convicted, the mom faces up to 20 days in jail and a $100 fine. Now, next week is Mother Angelica's 89th birthday, so there's still time for you to enter our latest contest in honor of Mother's Big Day. I want to know how Mother Angelica has touched or changed your life. It's last week of the contest. Was it something she said or did? Send your stories to Raymond at RaymondArroyo.com. Put Mother in the subject line. The author of the best stories will receive a free copy of one of my Mother Angelica books, and we may read your letter on air. Be sure to send those Mother Angelica remembrances to Raymond at RaymondArroyo.com. When we return, the bishops are rallying Catholics to fight for religious freedom. What is the goal here? And could it sway the upcoming elections in the U.S.? We'll ask Archbishop William Lori, who oversaw the drafting of the new bishop's statement, when the World Over Live continues. Stay with us.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. The USCCB, the Bishops' Conference, released a new statement today on religious freedom. It's really a rallying cry urging all citizens to fight for religious liberty both here and abroad. To comment on the document, our first most cherished liberty, is the chairman of the USCCB's Ad Hoc Committee for Religious Liberty, Bishop William Lori.
Raymond,
soon to be Archbishop, and I should congratulate you.
Thank you, Raymond.
So you're
so
already
much.
an Archbishop, but you will soon be Archbishop of Baltimore. If you've been,
thank you.
named to that post. So congratulations.
Thank
we
you.
were delighted hearing the news. Now tell us, what is the intention of this document, Archbishop?
This document is meant in a very readable form to lay out the Church's teaching on religious liberty, and also to remind us as Americans of our heritage of religious freedom, to help us be well-informed, not only about the basics, but also about the array of threats against religious liberty, and also about what it is we can do as Catholics and as committed people of faith to counter these attacks on
there's a real
religious
action
liberty.
plan here, and I want to get into that in a moment.
Great.
But I want to back up for a moment. You talk here about not only the HHS mandate, but you list a litany, really, of abuses against this first and cherished right. Tell us some of the other things you're concerned about beyond the HHS mandate, then we'll return.
Sure, HHS is, of course, the most neuralgic at the moment, but, for example, in Alabama, there's a law passed, and if the Church provides pastoral care for immigrants, the Church runs afoul of the law. In Connecticut, where I have served the last 11 years, there was an attempt to do a wholesale reorganization of the Catholic Church against the will of the bishops and the will of the Catholic people. There are, on college campuses, attempts to really limit religious speech and to make it such that religious clubs don't win recognition unless they allow people in who don't share those particular religious beliefs. In many states, dioceses and Catholic charities have been forced out of foster care and adoption services because they remain true to the Church's teaching. These are just a few of the things we're facing. It's really serious.
I want to share with people a quote from the document, and I want to get your reaction to it. You say, and here's the quote, "In the face of an unjust law, an accommodation is not to be sought, especially by resorting to equivocal words and deceptive practices." Is that a direct characterization of the Obama administration?
I would have to say that the accommodation that the administration has offered is no accommodation at all. The offensive HHS rule remains on the books. It's stated 4 times that it is unchanged. And while there is a new round of invitation to comment on rulemaking as regards this new accommodation, we don't regard it as any progress at all. We regard it rather as a sleight of hand.
This is bold. This is a bold statement, though. I mean, we haven't heard this kind of rhetoric from the bishops. I mean, to call it equivocal words and deceptive practices. What's deceptive about the approach here?
When you claim to be accommodating the interests that have been clearly laid out, but in fact you are simply offering a sort of
accounting trick is how you all
an
have described
accounting
it.
trick or something of that nature, then you're really not addressing it square on. What we would prefer is that the administration would sit down with us and say, what is your problem? And of course, it's a narrow definition of who we are and forcing us to violate our teaching. And then really push the reset button back to the liberty we have enjoyed until now. We're not trying to expand our liberties, and we're not trying to force anyone to do anything. We just want to maintain the liberties we have, and we don't want the government telling us what to do. It's not a question of our telling the government what to do.
You know how this is going to be spun in the media. They're going to say you all, the bishops, have turned into partisans. You're getting involved in politics. This is not where you should be, Bishop Lori.
But you know, Raymond, we didn't go looking for this fight. We have been well accommodated in federal law since the 70s. Before that, we didn't really need that accommodation. Now it's being taken back. We didn't choose the timing of this either. We don't regard this as a Republican or Democratic issue. We regard it as an American issue. And for those of us who are Catholics and those of us who are serious about religious liberty in the broader faith community, this is a very, very basic issue. It's happening in an election year, but that's not of our choosing, let me assure you.
This is another quote. Religious liberty, you write, and the ad hoc committee writes for the bishops, religious liberty is not only about our ability to go to Mass on Sunday or pray the rosary at home. It is about whether we can make our contribution to the common good of all Americans. Without religious liberty properly understood, all Americans suffer, deprived of the essential contribution in education, health care, feeding the hungry, civil rights, and social services that religious Americans make every day. How is that, why is that statement so important? Is it because we keep hearing from both the administration and some members of Congress, go away, you have a freedom of worship, leave us alone, now be quiet?
Sure. The HHS mandate says you're exempt if your religious organization hires only its own, serves only its own, and exists only to inculcate religious doctrine. That would leave out Christ and the apostles. That certainly leaves out Mother Teresa. What we are saying is what Pope Benedict says in his encyclical on God's love, that the proclamation of the word, the celebration of the sacraments, issues forth in works of charity and education. What the government is saying to us is, oh no, those are secular enterprises with a sort of a vague religious overlay or connection, and they are refusing to characterize them as we do. If religious freedom means anything, it's that we're able to present ourselves to the government and to the public and be accommodated unless there is some pressing, overwhelming issue that the government would have, like public safety.
The document states that religious liberty is not just a Catholic issue and or a Jewish issue or an Orthodox issue. It says it's an American issue. What does the committee mean by that?
In the experiment of limited government and in the wisdom of our founding fathers, they recognize that essential to this experiment we call America was the accommodation of religious faith, not as something that the state grants. The religious liberty is not a grant of the state. It's a gift of God, and that this new government, through the First Amendment, would accommodate it, would recognize it, would respect it. What we see now is a backing away from that. It's taking the non-establishment clause, turning it on its head and making it the enemy of religious liberty. We don't think That's what our founding fathers intended.
And it really, I encourage people, go and read the document, but, make up your own mind, read it. I've linked it on Facebook, on my Facebook page, to your site. It really is a history in so many ways of our religious liberties, starting in your soon-to-be archdiocese.
Sure, we go back to the Ark and the Dove in 1634, and those people who came over on those ships to Cobb Island, Maryland, were looking for religious toleration. They were Catholics, and Maryland was set up to be that place.
A haven for them.
And it didn't last long, but that was essential to what would happen a little more than a century later when America got started.
Are you reaching out to other communities? It seems the document is not only intended for Catholics. I mean, you've really broadened this discussion beyond this contraceptive mandate where the government is saying Catholic employers, Catholic institutions must provide contraceptives and abortifacients to their employees.
This is a long-term document. It looks toward not just HHS, but it looks toward a reassertion of the importance of religious liberty in American culture, so that American culture and Americans can be well equipped to defend religious liberty around the world. We have reached out to other religious denominations, and they have reached out to us. Evangelicals, segments of the Jewish community, many religious leaders have joined with us, and we with them, in addressing a letter to the president recently. It's referenced in this document about the HHS mandate. There's a lot of support
And
here.
what has been the response from the administration? A few weeks ago, Archbishop Dolan, Cardinal Dolan, was very candid in his dealings directly with the president, and he made it clear. I mean, I don't think I'm overextending his remarks by saying he was lied to by the administration. Has there been a response since then with all of this clamor?
I think, unfortunately, that we're in the very political season leading up to the elections. The contact I had was with the president's chief of staff, Jack Lew, and other high-ranking members, myself and Bishop William Murphy of Rockville Center. The distressing thing about that meeting is that when we said, what about taking this narrow definition of the church off the table? What about ceasing to sort out our institutions against our will into those which would be exempt and those which are non-exempt? And what about pulling back on the mandate? And that's just not going to be on the table. They said, well, let's iron out the wrinkles. And so the point of that was this new round of rulemaking surrounding this so-called accommodation. We're going to also be talking about that even more in the coming weeks, so that we can, in fact, make plenty of comment from many quarters about this unjust accommodation.
But this matter seems to be, you seem to be at a stalemate, though, on this HHS regulation, so far as the Bishops' Conference and the administration are concerned.
Yes, but it's very important when the time is ripe for us all to make our comments. They have to hear from us in spades. Let us never say it's useless to make a comment. It is very important that we keep making our voices heard with the administration and the Congress. There
is also a portion of this document that I found fascinating. I am going to sort of describe it in shorthand as it's a really a sensitivity course in religious liberty that you all are offering. It's 2 weeks, starting this summer on June 21st, the Feast of St. John Fisher and Thomas More, extending to July 4th. Why that time period, and tell us what's being desired?
Sure, it's called the Fortnight of Freedom. It's a time of prayer. Prayer is basic to this. With the Lord, we can do anything and everything. Without the Lord, we can do nothing. So we have to pray. And this is a great opportunity because in this 2-week run-up to July 4th, you have great saints' feast days. You just mentioned Thomas More and John Fisher. These are men who in England 16th century England stood up to Henry VIII. They stood for religious liberty. They gave their lives for the freedom of the church.
Is that what you're calling for by putting it on this date, this fortnight of freedom? Are you calling for Catholics to basically go to the mat over this issue of religious liberty?
We're talking about making a witness. This is not just a matter of political action, not just a matter of making our voices heard, although that is part of it. But I think it's time we stop taking religious liberty for granted and we bear witness to it. And sometimes the witness can be costly. I don't mean to be melodramatic, but anybody who bears witness to their faith in the workplace now, or at a cocktail party, or at a dinner party, knows it's costly. It's costly to do it nowadays.
And it's basically going to be, this is time set aside for preaching also in the church to sensitize people.
Preaching, teaching, praying, bearing witness.
And is the end result, is the hope that this will have some impact in the upcoming elections in November?
Look, yes, and that doesn't mean we're entering into the partisan fray. What we would like is for everybody who is seeking the approval of the American people to hold office to respect religious liberty. We would like both parties and people of all political stripes to step back and say, wait a minute, this isn't about contraception in the first instance, or abortifacients, or sterilization even in the first instance. This is about who we are as Americans. We don't want to change something so basic to who we are as Americans.
Final question before I let you go. We've been hearing much this week about this renewed war on women, and the bishops are being drafted into that narrative. Is this really, in your estimation, the administration's war on faith?
There is a definite pushback against religious liberty, and it's strong, it's powerful, it's well orchestrated. The purpose of this pushback, however, is not because they have a sudden interest in the theology of the church, but rather to advance, I think, a radical agenda that is anti-life. The church is a bastion of witness for life, an action for life, and so we're obviously a target.
Archbishop William Lori, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much,
Pleasure having you. You can find the document, Our First Most Cherished Liberty, by the USCCB Ad Hoc Committee on Religious Liberty at usccb.org, and we have it linked up on our Facebook page. Up next, Congressman Chris Smith joins us to talk about the current human rights situation in Sudan. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
My next guest is the co-chair of the Pro-Life Caucus in the U.S. House of Representatives and a member of the Tom Lantos Commission on Human Rights. He's been following the deteriorating situation in Sudan, following the separation of North and South earlier this year. Violence has erupted in the region once again, and so has the persecution of the Christian community. Here to fill us in on the latest and to give us his views on the presidential race is Congressman Chris Smith of New Jersey. Congressman, great to have you back.
Great to be back.
Let's talk for a moment about North and South split, but we're seeing a renewed tension and violence again.
Yes,
I thought this was all behind us.
Well, there was a peace treaty. It was signed in 2005 called the Comprehensive Peace Treaty, brokered by George W. Bush and his leadership, under his leadership. And it is held, now South Sudan is a separate country, the newest country in the world, and Khartoum wants none of that. If you recall, historically, I should say, it was General Bashir and the dictatorship in Khartoum, in Sudan, that invaded South Sudan, or what was then those areas, and killed 2 million people, displaced 4 million people. And as soon as that peace treaty came into fruition, the fighting began in Darfur, and hundreds of thousands have died there, as well as many have been internally displaced. Now, unfortunately, after January's final, we got a brand new country. There have been these, and I've actually chaired hearings. I chair the Africa Committee in the House of Representatives. We've held hearings on, and we've heard from first-person accounts about what's going on as the Bashir dictatorship, and he is a wanted war criminal by the International Criminal Court, systematically has been killing people, destroying churches in the Blue Nile area and in South Kordofan.
Yeah.
So
They're bombing these churches.
And now South Sudan is trying to, make a move to try to protect itself.
Right.
The UN is
But they really don't have an army.
Yeah, they've got the SPLA, which has some capabilities, but it doesn't have an air force.
Yep.
So the disproportionality of power, which has been aided and abetted by China, which has provided the munitions, the weapons.
Tell me about the Chinese role here. I mean, they're obviously after the same thing that Khartoum is after.
Yeah.
They want the oil.
They want the oil, and
that's
in exchange,
that's in the Nuba Mountain region.
It's in many areas, but it's also there. And what they're doing is that they're systematically providing munitions, especially weapons, including those that can drop bombs, an air force, in exchange for the oil. And they've been doing this throughout. We called, when the Olympics occurred in Beijing, Congressman Frank Wolf and I went to Beijing, and we were arguing then, as we were here in Washington, that these were the genocide Olympics. That how can a country that today is actively, and it was then, aiding and abetting such massive losses of life, could be holding an Olympic Games, and it goes on again today, unabated. The Chinese sometimes looks like, for posturing purposes, that they're playing a role for peace, but when you get down to it, they provide the guns.
This week, Khartoum went into the southern region, and they're occupying these oil-rich areas.
That's right.
And they refuse to back off. What can the United States do? What are we doing?
Well, we are trying, and I know the European Union and other countries are all trying, as well as African countries that are adjacent to Sudan, to finally bring some kind of multilateral sanctions upon the Khartoum government. We've had unilateral sanctions for the longest of times, but when you try to make it global, so that we really can impact upon the ability of Bashir and his henchmen to carry out all of this genocide. Right. China steps in and is ready, willing, and able to veto any sanctions with teeth. It's not unlike what's happening with Iran, where you get the Chinese and as well as the Russians who step in and foil efforts to have a global effort to say, if you commit these atrocities, you will be isolated.
There are some saying that Bashir, Khartoum, northern Sudan, is launching what amounts to an ethnic cleansing. They're wiping out non-Arabs, they're wiping out Christians. Is that accurate?
Oh, I think it is accurate. And if you look back at the earlier fight in South Sudan, it was more of a massacre. The Catholics and the animists were being invaded in what can only be described as an effort to impose Sharia law on South Sudan. And it was systematic killing. And that mindset has not gone away. And so it's a very, very dangerous escalation. Our hope is that there will be, an effort. Salva Kiir is the president of South Sudan, freely elected, and I think a very good man. I've met him many times. Bashir, I've also met him as well in Khartoum. Had an argument with him, quite frankly.
Oh, I'll bet.
It was an argument, but somehow, for the sake of all of the innocent people, the world community has to stop what they're doing and say, we got to focus on this.
Well, I mean, just to put it in context, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of displaced refugees, moving families, whole villages moving out. And when you look at this, having followed the work of our friend Bishop Gassis, Makram Gassis, for so many years, who built the church in southern Sudan and refortified it, hospitals and medical centers and schools and convents, they're firebombing all of that now. They're air bombing that. And we've been trying to reach them, and churches as well. As well as mosques. I mean, they're taking down they're taking down all manner of religious practice. They want an extreme Muslim regime here with Sharia law declared throughout the whole continent, or the whole country, rather.
And you know, there are dangerous movements throughout Africa where this is occurring. Al-Shabaab, which is the equivalent and the closely related to Al-Qaeda in Mogadishu and throughout that region, have done horrible killings, and they've been arrested somewhat in their ability to impose extremist Muslim beliefs. You know, if it's a moderate Muslim belief system that will tolerate other faiths, that is what religious freedom is all about. But unfortunately, when you do it with a bayonet or at the barrel of a gun, that kind of coercion has to be resisted very, very aggressively.
Well, and apostasy is illegal in Sudan.
That's right. Yeah.
There were, 170 people arrested under this charge in the past year.
Yeah.
Is this going to increase, and is it increasing?
Oh, I think it's increasing. You know, I'm not sure if it will continue to increase because many people, when they either become Christians or in some other way, move to another faith, they're not going to advertise it in most cases.
Let's talk about this presidential election. Come back home here. The faith vote, particularly the Catholic vote, is the swing vote in America. They tend to move with the wider population, but they end up being decisive, particularly when you get to these very hotly contested presidential races. Rick Santorum stepped out of the race this week because of money, because of his family situation. He said it was just, I didn't want to deal with the debt. I also think he was facing very diminishing poll numbers in his home state of Pennsylvania, and he couldn't have that, on his record, if you will, 2 losses there. So he got out of the race this week. Evangelicals are still leery of Mitt Romney. Will they coalesce around him? We've been seeing in these recent states a gradual, either he's splitting the vote with Santorum or losing by just a few points. Do you expect that will
Raymond, I think that
change?
That President Obama has tipped his hand. We knew he was the abortion president. He tried to conceal it and cloak it and act in a stealthy manner in the first couple of years, even though he was doing things that I and those of us who work on pro-life and pro-family issues found absolutely objectionable. He did it at a lower key level. That all ended when he told all faith-based organizations and the Catholic Church and other religions that you do this or else. You provide abortion-inducing chemicals or else. You will no longer be able to participate in health care. And so he tipped his hand. I think it was prematurely politically, because we all thought that would happen in a second term, and he would go after religion as no other president of the United States has ever done so. A war on religion, for want of a better word. He talks about the war on women. We're trying to defend women from the violence of abortion, which not only kills the child, but also causes, in many cases, significant psychological and other problems for the woman. Positive nonviolent alternatives to an unintended pregnancy. So that's the fight. He has now said, with this coercion policy, and that's all it is, you either do this or you're gone.
And what do you make of the bishop's recent statement and real action items?
Very encouraging. I think the bishops have realized that religious freedom is under attack in a vociferous way by the Obama administration. It's not the HHS mandate, it is the Obama mandate. The news reports are he made the final decision. The buck stops there. And as we've seen with his courting of Planned Parenthood, an organization that does 330,000 abortions every year, no mention of that in his most recent video.
And you see
about
this mandate as a kickback to Planned Parenthood, basically?
It's part of the whole push. They'll get some of the women who will come there and get abortions. It'll be promoted very aggressively through what
and the contraceptive distribution and things.
It becomes a whole effort to say, if you're not promoting these things, because abortion is not health care. If you're not promoting, you are then therefore ineligible to participate in the American dream and in the American society.
Back to
That's
politics.
Unbelievable. So I do think Mitt Romney, getting to your question earlier, is a very pro-life man, a pro-life governor. He, like many others, has had a walk towards the pro-life side, and we welcome that. There are some. Ronald Reagan signed into law the legalization of abortion in California when he was governor. He became a magnificent pro-life president. And I think that Mitt Romney will be a very strong pro-lifer. And look at the alternative. Anyone who says, well, we'll wait out another 4 years and see what happens then. Given another 4 years, Barack Obama will be untethered by the belief that he has to run another election. He's already saying, it's my last election. Yeah. He even said to the Russians the other day, psst, be quiet, I'll have more flexibility after the election. Yeah. He will be, already, the White House is the wholly owned subsidiary of Planned Parenthood and the abortion lobby. They say to do something, he does it. It'll be that much worse as Obamacare kicks in, as we see an unleashing of the culture of death, not just in the United States of America, but around the world. There are countries at grave risk of losing their pro-life laws. Right now, Rwanda. Yep. We lost Kenya just a little over a year ago, thanks to the Obama administration's providing of huge subsidies to organizations that were promoting abortion there during their Constitution review. We will be funding the U.S. taxpayer, one non-governmental organization after another, to promote the culture of death. And the predictable outcome will be more abortions and more death and mayhem. One last thing. The court will be packed. You can be sure that the Supreme Court, that is it's a 5-4 type of court with Kennedy usually being the swing vote. During the next 4 years, the next president will have probably at least one, if not more, opportunities to change the complexion of the court for the next generation. And if Obama gets that, he will pack it with litmus-tested pro-abortion jurists, as he has done already. And predictably, I would be very concerned about the so-called Freedom of Choice Act making a comeback, if not through the legislature, through the courts. And modest reforms like informed consent, the partial birth abortion ban, public funding for abortion, all of those things could quickly dissipate under the next 4 years. Be eviscerated and destroyed.
By federal fiat.
By federal fiat, right.
I have a question that just came in while we were talking about the international situation. One of the viewers writes, since it's another example, they're talking about Sudan, of Muslim aggression against Christians, do you really think the world will help much? It seems we ignored these atrocities. Maureen from New York.
Well, Maureen, unfortunately, there's much truth in what you say. I was aghast when the Obama administration was singing the praises of what was going on in Egypt. And many of us said right off the bat
hot spot we should discuss.
That the Muslim Brotherhood and other Islamic groups will make life even more difficult for the Coptic Christians and other people of faith. And I held 2 hearings on it, actually, and, got more information about just how bad it is. And the administration has been monitoring it, I guess, but what have we done to combat this assault on Christians? Even in Iraq, where we spent priceless blood of our men and women who suffered and died there for freedom, some of the oldest Christian denominations in all of history,
Chaldeans
especially, are either in flight or are refugees and live in daily terror of being killed or having a car bomb go off for one reason, because they're Christians.
Now, what do you make of the White House interacting and having conversations with the Muslim Brotherhood, which is
I was very
ongoing.
Discouraged about that, and
but they're saying, look, it's you got to open the door in the way that Ronald Reagan talked to Gorbachev, and I mean, you have to engage even people you disagree with, and it's the only way
engaging at the White House, even if it wasn't at the presidential level, certainly sends a message of at least tacit support. There's no doubt that engagement with dictatorships and people with whom we don't agree is important. But what's said in the meeting? How accommodating are we being? This president has literally thrown in the towel when it comes to the dictatorship in China. Hu Jintao came into town. He's the man who put Liu Xiaobo, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, into prison, his government, and thousands of others who believe in democracy and human rights. He's the one who carries out the infamous one-child per couple policy, which has imposed unbelievable suffering on the women of China, and especially on baby girls who have been singled out for sex selection abortions. You're only allowed one child there. Did the president bring any of that up? Hu Jintao was here. They talked, they smiled, they laughed, they had a state dinner, all of this affection. The man's a dictator. And we got to be willing to say that. Look him in the eye, confront him in a way that is civil.
He's also
but
America's loan officer, and that's
yeah,
I mean,
but they
that's kind of
Raymond,
ties in the budget problem.
True, but
and
they
the
would
budgetary
never.
crisis.
They being China, they would never be in a position to find a market that anywhere parallels the U.S. market. So, from an economic point of view, there is a symbiotic relationship. But that said, we have a duty to the oppressed to speak out boldly and effectively on human rights, and we have not done it vis-a-vis China. Hillary Clinton, on her first trip to China, said, "I'm not going to let human rights interfere," her words, "with climate change and peddling the U.S. debt there." That threw the dissidents of China under the bus. And remember, Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize. The year before, Liu Xiaobo, this great dissident, got it. I went to the meeting in Oslo, and it was one of the ones who nominated him for the prize, and initiated an effort in Congress for him. Here's the President of the United States taking a pass on human rights. They're both at a press conference at the White House. When asked about human rights, President Obama says, well, they have a different culture. They have a different system. They understand democracy. The Chinese, look at Taiwan, a flourishing democracy. Look at all the people in what's called the Laogai, or Gulag, who suffer because they want desperately to have the freedoms that everyone is entitled to.
To tie the ribbon around this, we're getting some emails, and they're asking about, they want to talk presidential politics, so I'm going to throw one more question. They're asking about Newt Gingrich, who remains in this race. He doesn't have very much money. The organization is pretty fractured and threadbare. But Newt Gingrich has always had one great thing going for him, and that's Newt Gingrich.
Yeah.
His oratorical skills, his brilliance at framing an argument. Does he have any influence on the waning days of this GOP contest?
No, I think, Raymond, it's time for Republicans and independents who support. There needs to be a uniting now, to take on Barack Obama. And we have to be absolutely tenacious to expose how far left Barack Obama has taken this country, his assault on religious freedom and on the culture of life. And Mitt Romney is the man, and I do hope people will support him.
So you think Newt should get out?
He should get out.
Okay, we'll leave it there.
Thank you, Raymond.
Representative Chris Smith, thanks so much for being here. Up next, is there really a war on women? And what of the health care law under review by the Supreme Court? Carrie Severino of the Judicial Crisis Network is here to discuss. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. My next guest is the Chief Counsel and Policy Director of the Judicial Crisis Network here in Washington, D.C. She's also a former law clerk to Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Here to discuss the possible fate of the health care law, as well as the much ballyhooed war on women, is Carrie Severino. Carrie, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having
Let's
me.
talk for a second about this war on women stuff.
Right.
I want to play a little soundbite for you. This is Hillary Rosen. She's a Democratic consultant to the Democratic National Committee here. Here's what she said about Ann Romney. This is Mitt Romney's wife. Listen.
What you have is Mitt Romney running around the country saying, well, my wife tells me that what women really care about are economic issues. And when I listen to my wife, that's what I'm hearing. Guess what? His wife has actually never worked a day in her life. She's never really dealt with the kinds of economic issues that a majority of the women in this country are facing in terms of how do we feed our kids, how do we send them to school, and how do we worry, and why do we worry about their future?
Now, Hillary Rosen, she has since apologized for that comment, as you can imagine.
Well, she should have.
Homemakers and housewives everywhere ripped their hair out when they heard that statement.
Well, right, and imagine, the woman staying at home with her family, she's not actually worried about how they're getting fed. She's not worried about how they're paying for school. It's just an absurd statement. And I think Ann Romney's response was great. She said, I think raising 5 boys really does count as work.
Yeah, that's right. She mentioned that in a tweet. And I think, exactly, mothers all around the country, including my wife, the mother of my children, was well, of course she's the mother of my children. Whose mother would
Yes.
she be? But they were jubilating. But there was a lot of conversation, I think, and it is an interesting conversation to have, because women who decide to stay home, and they are deciding to stay home in many cases, those who have the economic freedom to do so, they give up their career. They give up being in the workplace. And let's face it, being in the workplace is a lot easier than taking care of people who want and demand 100% of your time at all moments.
That's very. I mean, I've done both and struggled with this challenge in my own life.
Yeah.
And I have to say, there's something very easy about being able to go to the bathroom by yourself, going to lunch when you want to, and not having to worry about things. But it's such an important task to be the one taking care of the next generation. And it's frustrating, but I think also enlightening to see these Democratic operatives kind of throwing that away as if that doesn't really count. It's so when people are saying there's a war on women, you have to ask, which women and who's really waging that war. Yeah. I think there's a clear war on women who make certain choices with their lives, and that's disappointing to see that the Democratic Party is rejecting that as a reasonable option.
We had the TV on before dinner, and I have a little girl. She's 6 years old, Mariela, and she was listening and watching all of this. And you could see the kind of questions going off in her head, like, does mommy not work? Is she not? I mean, it's a terrible devaluation of what I would argue is the most important job, and certainly the one that contributes most to the future of a culture and a people and a country. What could be more important than making the family whole and sturdy and preparing it for the future?
Absolutely. And one of the things you pointed to, I think, shows how this war on women is a real broad issue, because who are the people who are maybe most concerned about the future, taking care of the next generations, the crushing budget that our children are going to be facing, whether our medical systems and our social security system will even be functional for our children. I think those are huge women's issues, and we're at a time when there's record numbers, almost 46 million people on food stamps, the majority of which, of course, are women. You've got 8% unemployment. We've got a crushing federal debt on our hands. These are all women's issues because they're all of our issues. It's insulting to think that women don't.
Well, it's all
think about
tied
those
together,
things.
and I mean, just the trajectory of this show. You see the debt. What happens when you don't have, when you're not solvent? You lose your moral voice, and you have issues and crises like the Sudanese situation, or Iran, or other hot spots in the world. You don't have the power to reach in and fix them or help in those situations because you're broke. You're really broke, morally and otherwise. And let's talk about this war on women, though. What is the war on women? Is there a real war on women, or is this just a narrative that's being created for a political end to advance what is ultimately a contraceptive mandate in the United States?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was the Democrats know that single women in particular are a big voting bloc for them, and they're trying to think, what can we do to get them out to vote? In 2010, a lot of single women stayed home, and they thought, oh, great, they all want contraception. Let's bring this in. I think what they didn't calculate, however, is that by trying to trump up this war on women thing, they would now, doing it at the expense of religious freedom, is just shooting themselves in the foot, because actually women do care a lot about religious freedom. And I think, thank God, the bishops have been very strong about standing up for that aspect of it, that it's not just about contraception. This is something that's about fundamental, basic First Amendment rights. This is the same issue that would happen whether it was the Catholic Church or a Jewish group or a Protestant church. Any organization should not be forced to pay for things that violate its conscience.
And we keep hearing about we need to have conferences on women. There was the White House conference on women last week. I actually think we need a conference on men. When you start looking at the statistics,
men are left behind.
Well, the men are really, let's face it, they're losing here. Women are out earning them and out learning them, according to one article I read here. Right. There's a new book, Liza Mundy's book, who's a columnist here at the Washington Post, a reporter for the Post. She's written a book called The Richer Sex, and in it, she says the next generation of female employees in the U.S. will take home more money than their male counterparts against every sector in employment. And when you look at the degrees being awarded, college degrees, university degrees, 3 out of every 5 are to a woman. So is there a real disparity, or is this just trumped up?
I think even if you look at the recent conference they had at the White House, they couldn't talk about the disparity because there isn't. Again, as you point out, it's kind of flipping the other direction. What they had to talk about is trying to maintain the gains we've done. You know what? We can get past this gender issue. Let's just all be Americans.
Yeah,
you know?
That's good. That's good advice. Very quickly, you were there during the oral arguments before the Supreme Court. Right. What is your gut? What was your read on what you heard? And you were also a Supreme Court clerk. Are we reading too much into the questioning over those 3 days?
You can never tell 100% from the questioning at all. It's always still a guess. But I have to say, I was heartened as an opponent of the mandate to see the kind of questions, the hard questions being put by the Chief Justice, by Justice Scalia, Justice Alito, and in particularly by Justice Kennedy, who everyone thinks is probably going to be the swing vote in this case. We could see from the questions the 4 liberals very solidly in favor of the health care law, but Justice Kennedy asked some solid questions about this is fundamentally changing the relationship of the individual to government. That's something he really cares about, protecting individuals from government intrusion. So if he's asking those questions, I think there's, I'm putting the thumb on the scales in favor of overturning the mandate.
That's
now.
where you think it's going to go?
That's where, I mean, we don't know how much is going down with it. We may even see the whole law go down. That might take away the HHS mandate and give us our religion's freedom back, too.
Yeah, but
that would be a nice
Given that
nice
question
bonus.
from Justice Scalia about, do we have to read all 2,700? I don't think they want to rebuild a law, and it really isn't their function. I mean, they have to either strike it all down or leave it, right?
I think that would be the easy. Either they take just that provision out and everyone agrees.
But everything
the
will fall apart.
The law is going to run it completely out of control if you do that. So I think that's the cleanest, clearest, least legislative thing the courts could do. Strike it all down.
Very good. Carrie, thank you so much for being
Great to
here.
have you.
To follow the work of Carrie Severino and her team at the Judicial Crisis Network, visit judicialnetwork.com. That's all the time we have, but the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Go to RaymondArroyo.com. The Twitter and Facebook pages are linked on the left-hand side of the screen. There you'll find the latest news, some commentary, that Bishop's document we talked about earlier, and things you won't find anywhere else. Don't forget to send your Mother Angelica stories to Raymond@RaymondArroyo.com. Until next week, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, I'm Raymond Arroyo. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.